Millionaire CEO sees housekeeper singing to her son, the same song that his deceased wife used to sing. He is shocked. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Thunder rolled across the Manhattan skyline as Harrison Montgomery stepped from his chauffeur-driven car, briefcase in hand. The imposing glass tower of Montgomery Financial stood gleaming despite the gloomy weather, much like its owner. Polished, impenetrable, successful. "Late meeting again, Mr. Montgomery?" asked Jenkins, his elderly doorman, with the familiarity of someone who had served the family for decades. "Always is," Harrison replied with a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. "How's the building holding up in this storm?" "Better than most of us, sir." Harrison nodded, heading toward the private elevator that would take him to the penthouse apartment he shared with his son Ethan. Another day of acquisitions, mergers, and ruthless business decisions behind him. Another evening, returning too late to see his boy awake. The elevator ascended silently, giving Harrison a moment to loosen his tie and roll his tense shoulders. At 42, he still cut an impressive figure, salt and pepper hair framing sharp features that financial magazines called intimidatingly handsome. But tonight, like most nights, exhaustion lined his face. When the doors opened to his penthouse, Harrison expected the usual silence. Instead, a soft melody floated through the air, stopping him mid-step. A woman's voice, gentle yet clear, was singing a lullaby. Stars above, dreams below, where the night winds gently blow. Harrison's briefcase slipped from his fingers, landing with a thud on the marble floor. That song, that exact melody, Rebecca's song. His heart pounding, Harrison followed the sound through the dimly lit apartment, past the untouched dining room where dinner sat cold, beyond his study with stacks of contracts awaiting his signature. The singing grew louder as he approached Ethan's bedroom. Through the half-open door, Harrison saw his 10-year-old son tucked beneath blue covers, eyes heavy with approaching sleep. Beside the bed sat a young woman Harrison vaguely recognized as the new housekeeper his assistant had hired last week. Ms. Collins, if he remembered correctly. But it wasn't her presence that rooted him to the spot. It was the lullaby spilling from her lips. The very same song Rebecca had sung to Ethan every night before her death 3 years ago. A song she had always claimed was uniquely hers, composed when she first felt Ethan kick in her womb. "Close your eyes, my sweet child, till morning light comes smiling." Harrison remained frozen in the hallway, one hand pressed against the wall for support. How did this stranger know Rebecca's song? The private melody that had died with his wife in that horrible accident? The song he hadn't been able to bring himself to sing since, though he knew Ethan missed it desperately. The housekeeper's voice trailed off as Ethan's breathing deepened into sleep. She tucked the blanket more securely around his shoulders, smoothed his dark hair so like Harrison's own, and turned to leave. That's when she saw Harrison standing in the doorway. "Mr. Montgomery," she gasped, a hand flying to her throat. "I'm so sorry, I didn't hear you come in." Harrison couldn't respond. His eyes were fixed on her face, searching for answers. She was younger than he'd realized, perhaps in her late 20s, with warm brown eyes and hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "That song," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you learn it?" The woman, Emma Collins he now recalled, looked confused by the intensity of his question. "The lullaby? My grandmother taught it to me when I was little. Ethan was having trouble sleeping and I thought it might help." She hesitated, reading his expression. "I apologize if I overstepped." Harrison struggled to maintain his composure. "My wife used to sing that exact song to Ethan every night before she died." Emma's eyes widened. "The same song? But that's impossible." Harrison finished for her. "She always told me she composed it herself." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by Ethan's soft snores. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating Emma's concerned face. "I should go," she said quietly, stepping around Harrison. "Wait." Harrison's command was soft but unmistakable. "Please, I need to understand this." Emma turned, her expression cautious. Harrison noticed her hands trembling slightly at her sides. "Mr. Montgomery, I only know what my grandmother taught me. I had no idea." Harrison studied her, the initial shock giving way to suspicion, confusion, and something else. A strange, desperate hope he couldn't quite name. "Tomorrow," he said finally. "We'll talk about this tomorrow." Emma nodded, slipping past him into the hallway. Harrison remained at Ethan's doorway, watching his son's peaceful sleep, listening to the fading footsteps of the woman who had just shattered his understanding of the past with a simple lullaby. For the first time in 3 years, Rebecca's melody echoed through the rooms of his home again, awakening memories he'd tried desperately to bury, and questions he'd never thought to ask. Morning streamed through the penthouse windows, bathing the minimalist decor in golden light. Harrison sat at the kitchen counter, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold before him. He'd barely slept, Rebecca's lullaby replaying in his mind alongside questions he couldn't answer. "Dad, you're still home." Ethan's voice broke through his thoughts. His son bounded into the kitchen, already dressed for school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Harrison checked his watch. 7:30 a.m. He was usually gone by 6:45. "Thought I'd have breakfast with you today," he said, forcing a smile. Ethan's face lit up. "Ms. Collins makes amazing pancakes. She said I could help this morning." As if summoned, Emma appeared in the doorway, hesitating when she saw Harrison. She wore simple black pants and a white blouse, her hair pulled back neatly. Professional, unassuming. Yet Harrison couldn't help scrutinizing her, searching for clues to the mystery she represented. "Good morning, Mr. Montgomery," she said politely. "Would you like fresh coffee?" "Please." He studied her movements as she worked in his kitchen, noting her efficiency and the way Ethan watched her with obvious admiration. "Ms. Collins was singing that pretty song again this morning, Dad," Ethan said, climbing onto a stool. "The one that helps me sleep." Harrison's gaze sharpened. "Was she?" Emma's hands faltered slightly as she poured the coffee. "Just while I was preparing Ethan's lunch, sir." "It's Mom's song," Ethan continued, oblivious to the tension. "But Miss Collins knows it too, isn't that cool?" Before Harrison could respond, the elevator chimed. Alessandra Vega, his executive assistant, strode into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, a privilege earned through 15 years of keeping his business empire running. "Harrison, you're late for the Wilson meeting," she announced, eyebrows raised at finding him still at home. Her gaze swept over Emma, assessing and dismissive. "Reschedule it," Harrison replied. Alessandra's perfectly lined eyes widened. "You've been trying to close Wilson for months. They don't take kindly to." "I said reschedule." Harrison's tone left no room for argument. With a tight nod, Alessandra tapped something into her tablet. "Fine, but the board call at 11 is non-negotiable." "The Singapore acquisition, I'll be there." Harrison turned to Ethan. "I need to talk with Ms. Collins. Will you go get ready for school?" Once Ethan reluctantly departed, Harrison faced Emma. "I'd like the full story about that song." Alessandra raised an eyebrow but remained silent, her curiosity evident. Emma clasped her hands. "As I said, my grandmother taught me the lullaby. She worked as a music teacher at the Hamilton School of Music for 30 years. Harrison stiffened. "Rebecca attended Hamilton." "I didn't know that, sir. My grandmother taught many students over the years." "Rebecca always claimed she wrote that song herself," Harrison said. "She was protective of it." "Folk melodies often travel," Emma offered, gently. "Sometimes people rediscover them and think they're creating something new." Harrison paced the kitchen. "Rebecca wouldn't have lied about this. We shared everything." Alessandra cleared her throat. "Harrison, who is this woman exactly?" "Emma Collins, the new housekeeper." "Recommended by the agency?" Alessandra's tone was skeptical. "Your agency," Harrison confirmed. Emma stepped forward. "Mr. Montgomery, I understand this must be unsettling. If my presence is causing distress, No, Harrison interrupted, surprising himself with his vehemence. Ethan is connecting with you. He's been withdrawn since Rebecca died. This is the first time he's shown enthusiasm for anything. Alessandra frowned. Harrison, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Ms. Collins stays, he said firmly, but I want to know everything about that song. Your grandmother, is she still alive? Emma's expression softened. No, she passed 5 years ago. Harrison ran a hand through his hair. I need to understand this. Rebecca believed that song was uniquely hers, something she created for our son. I could write down the lyrics and melody as I know them, Emma suggested. Perhaps there are differences. I'd like that, Harrison nodded, and I want you to continue singing it for Ethan. Of course. Alessandra's phone buzzed. Harrison, we need to leave now if you're making that board call. He nodded reluctantly. We'll continue this discussion later. As Harrison gathered his things, he heard Ethan chattering excitedly to Emma about school. He paused in the hallway, struck by how natural they seemed together, how Ethan's face had come alive in a way it hadn't since Rebecca's death. Inside the elevator, Alessandra turned to him. That woman knows your wife's private lullaby and you're keeping her around your son? Have you considered she might have researched your family? That this could be calculated? To what end? Harrison asked. Money. Access. The tabloids would pay handsomely for intimate details about the reclusive widower Harrison Montgomery. Harrison considered this. The business world had taught him caution, suspicion. Yet something about Emma's genuine surprise last night rang true. Look into her background again, he conceded. Thoroughly. Alessandra nodded, satisfied. But, Alessandra, he added as the elevator reached the lobby, Ethan likes her. I haven't seen him this animated in 3 years. Just be careful, she warned. Sometimes the things we want most cloud our judgment. As the car pulled away from the curb, Harrison's thoughts remained in the penthouse with the mysterious woman who knew Rebecca's song, a melody that had died with his wife but somehow lived, in a stranger's voice. The penthouse was quiet when Harrison returned that evening, much earlier than usual. The board call had gone smoothly, but his mind had wandered throughout the day, distracted by memories of Rebecca and questions about Emma Collins. He found Ethan in the rarely used music room, sitting beside Emma at the grand piano that had gathered dust since Rebecca's death. The sight stopped Harrison in the doorway. Rebecca had been an accomplished pianist, but he'd closed the room after the funeral, unable to bear the memories it contained. "Dad!" Ethan exclaimed, spotting him. "You're home early. Miss Collins is showing me how to play Mom's song." Emma stood quickly, looking uncertain. "I hope that's all right, Mr. Montgomery." Ethan mentioned the piano, and I thought. Harrison approached slowly, taking in the scene. Sheet music lay open on the stand. Handwritten notes in Emma's neat script, he assumed. The piano's glossy surface had been wiped clean of dust. "It's fine," he said, though his chest tightened at seeing the piano active again. "I didn't know you played, Miss Collins." "Not like a professional," she admitted, "but enough to teach beginners." Harrison nodded toward Ethan. "Show me what you've learned." Beaming with pride, Ethan positioned his small fingers over the keys and carefully picked out the first few notes of Rebecca's lullaby. The melody was halting, imperfect, but unmistakable. "That's wonderful, Ethan," Harrison said, genuinely impressed. "Ms. Collins says I have natural talent like Mom did," Ethan announced. Harrison's gaze shifted to Emma. "How would you know about my wife's talent?" "I didn't," she answered quickly. "Ethan told me." An awkward silence fell until Ethan tugged at Harrison's sleeve. "Dad, look what else we found." He pointed to a stack of old photographs that had been stored in the piano bench. Harrison picked them up, his breath catching. Rebecca at the piano, her dark hair falling over her shoulders as she played. Rebecca with infant Ethan singing to him. Their family in happier times. "We were looking for more music sheets," Emma explained softly. "I didn't mean to intrude on private memories." Harrison shook his head, unable to speak for a moment. He hadn't looked at these photos in years. I forgot these were here, he finally managed. Ethan pointed to one picture. That's Mom playing at her school concert. Miss Collins says her grandmother taught at that same music school. Harrison examined the photo more closely. Rebecca at 17, performing at Hamilton School of Music. The connection was too specific to be coincidence. Ethan, why don't you practice what we learned while I speak with your father? Emma suggested. Once they stepped into the hallway, Emma spoke first. I've been thinking about this connection all day. My grandmother, Eleanor Collins, taught piano at Hamilton from 1975 to 2005. If your wife studied there. She graduated in 2002, Harrison supplied. Then my grandmother almost certainly taught her, or at least knew her. The school wasn't very large. Harrison processed this, but it doesn't explain how Rebecca claimed to have composed a song your grandmother apparently taught you. Emma hesitated. May I speak freely, Mr. Montgomery? He nodded. Music is rarely created in isolation. Composers borrow, adapt, combine. My grandmother collected folk melodies from around the world. Perhaps your wife heard one and adapted it, genuinely believing she'd created something new. The explanation made sense, yet Harrison struggled to accept it. You don't know how protective. Rebecca was of that song. She wouldn't play it for anyone but Ethan and me. I understand how important this is to you, Emma said gently. I've written down the melody as I know it. Perhaps you could compare it with any recordings you have of your wife's version? Harrison tensed. I don't have recordings. The admission pained him. After Rebecca died, he'd locked away most reminders of her, including the videos on his phone of her singing to Ethan. The grief had been too raw. From the music room, Ethan's halting practice continued, the simple notes of the lullaby floating through the hallway. He misses her, Harrison said quietly. I've tried to be both parents, but music was their special connection. He's talented, Emma offered, and eager to learn. Whatever the origin of the song, it clearly connects him to his mother's memory. Harrison studied Emma, searching for any hint of deception. Alessandra's warnings echoed in his mind, yet he saw only compassion in Emma's expression. I'd like you to continue teaching him, he decided. But I need to understand this connection better. A quiet ping from his phone interrupted them. A message from Alessandra. Background check complete on E. Collins, call me. I should check on Ethan, Emma said, not noticing Harrison's sudden distraction. He tends to get frustrated when he can't master something immediately. As Emma returned to the music room, Harrison stepped into his study to call Alessandra, watching through the doorway as Ethan laughed at something Emma said. His son's smile, so rare these days, created a conflicted knot of emotions. Gratitude toward Emma, suspicion about her appearance in their lives, and beneath it all, a growing warmth he wasn't ready to acknowledge. Whatever Alessandra had found, Harrison realized he was already invested in Emma's presence in their home. For Ethan's sake, he told himself firmly. Only for Ethan's sake. Nothing suspicious in her background, Alessandra reported, pacing Harrison's home office later that evening. Emma Collins, 28, graduated from NYU with a degree in education. Her employment history checks out: 3 years as a kindergarten teacher, then various household positions. The economy hit education hard. Harrison frowned. And her grandmother? Eleanor Collins was indeed a piano instructor at Hamilton for 30 years, well respected by all accounts. Alessandra paused. But there's something else. I found an old faculty photograph. She held out her tablet, displaying a group picture from 1999. Harrison recognized a much younger version of Rebecca's former piano teacher, Dr. Winters, standing beside a white-haired woman with Emma's warm eyes and kind smile. That's Eleanor Collins, Alessandra confirmed. And this? She zoomed in on a teenage girl in the back row of what appeared to be a student recital group. Harrison's breath caught. Rebecca. They were connected, Harrison. Your wife and Emma's grandmother. Harrison stared at the photo, emotions churning. It still doesn't explain how they both knew the same lullaby. Alessandra sighed. Perhaps it's not as mysterious as It seems. But I'm more concerned about why Emma Collins is suddenly in your home, teaching your son the same song. The agency placed her, Harrison reminded her. Yes, but... A knock interrupted them. Emma stood in the doorway, Ethan hovering behind her. I'm sorry to disturb you, she said. Ethan wanted to say goodnight. Harrison quickly closed the tablet. Of course. Ethan ran to hug his father, eyes bright with excitement. Dad, can Ms. Collins teach me piano every day? I want to learn all of Mom's songs. We'll see, Harrison said, ruffling his son's hair. Now off. To bed. After Ethan reluctantly departed with Emma, Alessandra resumed her warnings. Don't you find the timing convenient? Just as Montgomery Financial is negotiating the largest acquisition in its history, a woman appears with mysterious connections. To your late wife? Harrison was saved from answering by another arrival. Jonathan Winters, Rebecca's cousin and a significant investor in Montgomery Financial, strode into the office unannounced. Harrison, Alessandra texted that you were actually home before midnight. Had to see this miracle myself. Jonathan's casual greeting belied his sharp assessment of the room. Jonathan. Wasn't expecting you, Harrison replied, standing to shake his hand. Clearly. Jonathan's gaze drifted to the open doorway where Emma was returning from putting Ethan to bed. And who's this? Emma Collins, Mr. Ethan's new music teacher, Emma introduced herself. Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Music teacher? I wasn't aware Ethan had musical aspirations. Ms. Collins is also our housekeeper, Harrison clarified. How? Efficient, Jonathan remarked. Though in my experience, household staff should remain just that. In the background, handling household matters. Emma's cheeks colored slightly. If you'll excuse me, I have some tidying to finish. After she left, Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Housekeeper and music teacher? Bit unconventional, Harrison. Ethan likes her, Harrison said simply. Jonathan settled into a chair. I actually came to discuss the Westridge acquisition. The board's concerned about your recent distraction. I'm not distracted, Harrison countered. You left the office at 5 today, Alessandra pointed out. That hasn't happened in years. Harrison felt a flare of irritation. I'm entitled to spend time with my son. Of course, Jonathan agreed smoothly. But with the Westridge deal hanging in the balance, your legacy, Harrison, timing is critical. The conversation shifted to business, but Harrison remained distracted, aware of the soft notes of the piano drifting from down the hall. Despite sending Ethan to bed, Emma was playing quietly, the lullaby again, but with variations he hadn't heard before. Half an hour later, Jonathan requested a drink. As they moved to the living room, they passed the music room where Emma still played softly. Jonathan paused, listening. That melody, it sounds familiar. Harrison tensed. It's just something Emma's teaching Ethan. No, I know that piece. Jonathan stepped into the music room, causing Emma to stop abruptly. My cousin Rebecca used to play that. She wrote it herself. Emma stood, clearly uncomfortable. Good evening, sir. Where did you learn that song? Jonathan demanded. My grandmother taught it to me, Emma replied. She was a piano instructor. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Rebecca composed that lullaby for Ethan. She was very clear it was her original work. Harrison stepped between them. Jonathan, it's been a long day. No, I want to understand how this woman knows Rebecca's private composition. Jonathan's voice hardened. It was personal to her, not something any random housekeeper should be playing. Mr. Winters, I assure you, Emma began. I find it highly suspicious, Jonathan continued, that you've appeared in this household with some connection to Rebecca. What exactly are you after? That's enough, Harrison interrupted. Emma is here at my request, teaching Ethan at my request. Your concerns are noted but unnecessary. Jonathan studied Harrison's face, then shook his head. You're making a mistake letting this woman get close to Ethan. Remember Victoria Palmer, the nanny who sold stories about your family to the tabloids? How do you know this isn't more of the same? Emma paled. I would never. Emma, please give us a moment, Harrison said quietly. After she left, Jonathan leaned closer. Harrison, you've built an empire by being cautious. Don't let sentimentality cloud your judgment now. If this woman has somehow learned details about Rebecca to ingratiate herself with you and Ethan. I've had her thoroughly vetted, Harrison countered, and yet she plays Rebecca's private lullaby. Jonathan drained his scotch. Just be careful. You have more than Ethan to consider. You have shareholders, employees, a legacy. After Jonathan left, Harrison found Emma in the kitchen, hands trembling slightly as she cleaned up. I apologize for Jonathan, he said. He and Rebecca were close. I understand, Emma replied, not meeting his eyes. Perhaps it would be better if I resigned. I never meant to cause disruption. The thought of Emma leaving sent an unexpected pang through Harrison, not just for Ethan's sake. No, he said firmly. Ethan needs you. What he didn't say was that the music was returning life to his home for the first time in years, and that the mystery of the lullaby now felt less like a threat and more like a thread connecting past to present, pulling him toward something he couldn't yet name but increasingly didn't want to lose. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, casting long rectangles of warmth across the hardwood floors. Harrison sat at the kitchen counter, reviewing contracts but finding his attention repeatedly drawn to the sounds emanating from the music room. Ethan's determined practice punctuated by Emma's patient guidance. 3 weeks had passed since Jonathan's confrontational visit. Despite Alessandra's continued wariness and Jonathan's occasional pointed remarks about appropriate boundaries, Harrison had allowed the music lessons to continue. The change in Ethan was too significant to ignore. His son smiled more, talked more, seemed more present than he had in years. Giving up on work, Harrison wandered toward the music room. He paused in the doorway, observing unnoticed as Emma guided Ethan's small hands across the keys. That's it, she encouraged, as Ethan completed a difficult passage. You're getting the rhythm now. Ethan beamed with pride. Can I show Dad when he's not busy? I'd like to see it now if that's all right, Harrison said, stepping into the room. Dad, Ethan spun around. I didn't know you were home. The surprise in his voice stung Harrison, a reminder of how often he wasn't present. Thought I'd work. From home today. Harrison approached the piano. What are you learning? It's the second part of Mom's lullaby, Ethan explained. Miss Collins says it's like the morning after the stars when everything wakes up. Harrison glanced at Emma, who nodded. The lullaby your wife sang is actually part of a longer piece. The first section is gentle, for sleeping, but it continues into a brighter awakening melody. I never heard Rebecca play anything beyond the lullaby portion, Harrison said. Maybe she didn't know the rest, Emma suggested. Folk melodies often get fragmented as they're passed down. Ethan tugged Harrison's sleeve. Want to hear me play it? Harrison sat beside his son on the bench. Absolutely. As Ethan played, Harrison found himself transported. Though his son's rendition was simple, the melody's evolution from the familiar lullaby into this uplifting continuation felt right somehow, as if he were hearing something that had always been meant to follow. That was wonderful, Harrison said when Ethan finished. Your mother would be very proud. Ethan's face lit up. Ms. Collins says I have Mom's hands. Emma, who had stepped back to give them space, looked apologetic. I hope that wasn't overstepping. In the photos, I noticed Mrs. Montgomery had the same long fingers Ethan has, perfect for piano. You're right, Harrison said softly. She did. Ethan hopped off the bench. Can I get some juice? I'm thirsty from all that practicing. After he darted off, silence settled between Harrison and Emma. She began gathering sheet music, clearly uncomfortable being alone with him. He's progressing remarkably, Harrison said, remaining seated at the piano. He's determined, Emma replied, and naturally talented. Harrison ran his fingers lightly over the keys. Rebecca was the musical one. I played a little in college, but nothing serious. You never play now? Harrison shook his head. Not since she died. It was her domain. Emma hesitated, then said gently, "Music isn't meant to be entombed with those we've lost. It's a living thing." The words resonated in a way Harrison hadn't expected. Without thinking, he positioned his hands and played the opening bars of the lullaby, the first time he'd touched the piano in 3 years. The notes came back to him more easily than he'd anticipated, muscle memory guiding his fingers through the familiar melody. When he finished the lullaby portion, he stopped, not knowing the continuation Emma had taught Ethan. "That was beautiful," Emma said softly. "I'm rusty," Harrison demurred. "Would you like to learn the rest?" she offered. Before he could answer, Ethan returned, juice in hand, eyes wide with astonishment. "Dad, you're playing Mom's song." Harrison felt momentarily self-conscious, as if caught doing something forbidden. "Just remembering." "Play it with me," Ethan insisted, clambering back onto the bench. "Ms. Collins can show us both the whole thing." Harrison should have excused himself. There were contracts to review, calls to make. Instead, he found himself nodding. "All right, show me." What followed was something Harrison would never have imagined possible weeks ago. Sitting beside his son at Rebecca's piano, with Emma standing behind them, gently guiding their hands through the continuation of the melody. The lullaby that had once represented only his grief gradually transformed into something brighter, hopeful. When they reached the end of the piece, Ethan threw his arms around Harrison. "We did it, Dad. We played Mom's whole song together." Harrison held his son close, overcome with emotion he couldn't fully name. Over Ethan's head, his eyes met Emma's. Her expression reflected understanding, compassion, and something else, a warmth that made him quickly look away. "I should check on lunch," Emma said tactfully, slipping out of the room. "Dad?" Ethan asked once they were alone. "Do you think Mom can hear us playing her song?" Harrison swallowed the lump in his throat. "I think she'd be very happy to know we're playing music again. Ms. Collins says music is like a bridge between people, even when they're apart. She's very wise," Harrison murmured, surprised by how much he meant it. Later that evening, after Ethan was asleep, Harrison found himself drawn back to the piano. Emma was in the kitchen finishing dishes when she heard him playing the lullaby again, but this time continuing hesitantly into the second part. She appeared in the doorway but didn't enter, respecting his privacy. Harrison nodded for her to join him. "You're a natural," she said, sitting in a chair near the piano. "The music was always in you." "Rebecca would play this every night," Harrison said, his fingers still moving across the keys. "I never thought I'd hear it in this apartment again after she died." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes what we need most comes back to us in unexpected ways." Harrison's hands stilled on the keys. "I've been suspicious of you," he admitted, "wondering about your intentions, how you knew Rebecca's song. Jonathan and Alessandra are still suspicious." "I know," Emma said simply. "But whatever brought you here, whatever the explanation for the song, you've given Ethan something I couldn't. Music was Rebecca's gift to him, and I couldn't carry it forward." "You're carrying it now," Emma pointed out. In the soft lamplight, with Rebecca's melody lingering in the air between them, Harrison realized something had shifted. The walls he'd built after Rebecca's death, around his heart, around this home, were beginning to crumble, note by note. And for the first time in 3 years, the thought didn't terrify him. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, casting long rectangles of warmth across the hardwood floors. Harrison sat at the kitchen counter, reviewing contracts but finding his attention repeatedly drawn to the sounds emanating from the music room. Ethan's determined practice punctuated by Emma's patient guidance. 3 weeks had passed since Jonathan's confrontational visit. Despite Alessandra's continued wariness and Jonathan's occasional pointed remarks about appropriate boundaries, Harrison had allowed the music lessons to continue. The change in Ethan was too significant to ignore. His son smiled more, talked more, seemed more present than he had in years. Giving up on work, Harrison wandered toward the music room. He paused in the doorway, observing unnoticed, as Emma guided Ethan's small hands across the keys. "That's it?" she encouraged as Ethan completed a difficult passage. "You're getting the rhythm now." Ethan beamed with pride. "Can I show Dad when he's not busy?" "I'd like to see it now, if that's all right," Harrison said, stepping into the room. "Dad?" Ethan spun around. "I didn't know you were home." The surprise in his voice stung Harrison, a reminder of how often he wasn't present. "Thought I'd work from home today." Harrison approached the piano. "What are you learning?" "It's the second part of Mom's lullaby," Ethan explained. "Ms. Collins says it's like the morning after the stars, when everything wakes up." Harrison glanced at Emma, who nodded. "The lullaby your wife sang is actually part of a longer piece. The first section is gentle for sleeping, but it continues into a brighter, awakening melody." "I never heard Rebecca play anything beyond the lullaby portion," Harrison said. "Maybe she didn't know the rest," Emma suggested. "Folk melodies often get fragmented as they're passed down." Ethan tugged Harrison's sleeve. "Want to hear me play it?" Harrison sat beside his son on the bench. "Absolutely." As Ethan played, Harrison found himself transported. Though his son's rendition was simple, the melody's evolution from the familiar lullaby into this uplifting continuation felt right somehow, as if he were hearing something that had always been meant to follow. "That was wonderful," Harrison said when Ethan finished. "Your mother would be very proud." Ethan's face lit up. "Ms. Collins says I have Mom's hands." Emma, who had stepped back to give them space, looked apologetic. "I hope that wasn't overstepping. In the photos, I noticed Mrs. Montgomery had the same long fingers Ethan has, perfect for piano." "You're right," Harrison said softly. "She did." Ethan hopped off the bench. "Can I get some juice? I'm thirsty from all that practicing." After he darted off, silence settled between Harrison and Emma. She began gathering sheet music, clearly uncomfortable being alone with him. "He's progressing remarkably," Harrison said, remaining seated at the piano. "He's determined," Emma replied, "and naturally talented." Harrison ran his fingers lightly over the keys. "Rebecca was the musical one. I played a little in college, but nothing serious." "You never play now?" Harrison shook his head. "Not since she died. It was her domain." Emma hesitated, then said, gently, "Music isn't meant to be entombed with those we've lost. It's a living thing." The words resonated in a way Harrison hadn't expected. Without thinking, he positioned his hands and played the opening bars of the lullaby, the first time he'd touched the piano in 3 years. The notes came back to him more easily than he'd anticipated, muscle memory guiding his fingers through the familiar melody. When he finished the lullaby portion, he stopped, not knowing the continuation Emma had taught Ethan. "That was beautiful," Emma said softly. "I'm rusty," Harrison demurred. "Would you like to learn the rest?" she offered. Before he could answer, Ethan returned, juice in hand, eyes wide with astonishment. "Dad, you're playing Mom's song." Harrison felt momentarily self-conscious, as if caught doing something forbidden. "Just remembering." "Play it with me," Ethan insisted, clambering back onto the bench. "Ms. Collins can show us both the whole thing." Harrison should have excused himself. There were contracts to review, calls to make. Instead, he found himself nodding. "All right, show me." What followed was something Harrison would never have imagined possible weeks ago. Sitting beside his son at Rebecca's piano, with Emma standing behind them, gently guiding their hands through the continuation of the melody. The lullaby that had once represented only his grief gradually transformed into something brighter, hopeful. When they reached the end of the piece, Ethan threw his arms around Harrison. "We did it, Dad. We played Mom's whole song together." Harrison held his son close, overcome with emotion he couldn't fully name. Over Ethan's head, his eyes met Emma's. Her expression reflected understanding, compassion, and something else, a warmth that made him quickly look away. "I should check on lunch," Emma said tactfully, slipping out of the room. "Dad?" Ethan asked once they were alone. "Do you think Mom can hear us playing her song?" Harrison swallowed the lump in his throat. "I think she'd be very happy to know we're playing music again." Ms. Colin says music is like a bridge between people even when they're apart. She's very wise, Harrison murmured, surprised by how much he meant it. Later that evening, after Ethan was asleep, Harrison found himself drawn back to the piano. Emma was in the kitchen finishing dishes when she heard him playing the lullaby again, but this time continuing hesitantly into the second part. She appeared in the doorway but didn't enter, respecting his privacy. Harrison nodded for her to join him. "You're a natural," she said, sitting in a chair near the piano. "The music was always in you." "Rebecca would play this every night," Harrison said, his fingers still moving across the keys. "I never thought I'd hear it in this apartment again after she died." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes what we need most comes back to us in unexpected ways." Harrison's hands stilled on the keys. "I've been suspicious of you," he admitted, "wondering about your intentions, how you knew Rebecca's song. Jonathan and Alessandra are still suspicious." "I know," Emma said simply. "But whatever brought you here, whatever the explanation for the song, you've given Ethan something I couldn't. Music was Rebecca's gift to him, and I couldn't carry it forward." "You're carrying it now," Emma pointed out. In the soft lamplight, with Rebecca's melody lingering in the air between them, Harrison realized something had shifted. The walls he'd built after Rebecca's death, around his heart, around this home, were beginning to crumble note by note, and for the first time in 3 years, the thought didn't terrify him. Morning rain tapped gently against the penthouse windows, mirroring Harrison's somber mood. The Westridge dinner had been a qualified success. The acquisition talks would move forward, yet something felt hollow in the victory. He found himself at the kitchen counter, coffee cooling before him, remembering Ethan's disappointed face when he'd maintained his business demeanor during the piano performance. His phone buzzed with Alessandra's name. He silenced it, needing a moment before diving back into work demands. The penthouse felt unusually quiet. Emma wasn't due for another hour, and Ethan still slept. Harrison wandered to the music room, drawn by some unnamed pull. The piano stood in the soft gray morning light, sheet music still arranged from Ethan's practice. He sat at the bench, running, his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, remembering Rebecca's hands moving confidently across this same instrument. "I don't know what I'm doing, Beck," he whispered to the empty room. His fingers found the first notes of the lullaby, playing softly to avoid waking Ethan. The melody felt different in the morning solitude, more melancholy than when played with his son's enthusiastic energy. As he played, Harrison noticed a folder of sheet music he hadn't seen before, tucked partially under the bench. Setting aside his coffee, he retrieved it. A collection of handwritten music with Eleanor Collins arrangements written on the cover in faded ink. His curiosity piqued. Harrison opened the folder. Inside were dozens of folk melodies transcribed, for piano, organized by country of origin. He flipped through until a familiar title stopped him. Lullaby of the Stars, Northern Italian Folk Melody, arranged 1975. Harrison stared at the yellowed page. The notes were unmistakably the same melody Rebecca had claimed as her own creation, the lullaby she had sung to Ethan. Yet here it was, transcribed decades earlier by Emma's grandmother. A note in the margin caught his attention. Taught to R.W. She has lovely interpretation. Gifted student, R.W. Rebecca Winters. The discovery should have vindicated his suspicions, proven that Rebecca had misrepresented the song's origins. Instead, he felt a strange peace settling over him. The mystery had an explanation, not deception. But a young Rebecca falling in love with a melody her teacher shared, internalizing it so completely that years later, she believed it her own creation. "Dad?" Ethan stood in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep. "You're playing Mom's song." Harrison set the music aside. "Good morning. Did I wake you?" Ethan shook his head, coming to sit beside him on the bench. "Are you mad about my performance last night? You seemed different after." Harrison placed an arm around his son's shoulders. "Not at all. You played beautifully. I was distracted by work and I shouldn't have been. I'm sorry." "It's okay." Ethan said with the easy forgiveness of childhood. Ms. Collins explained that sometimes you have to wear your business face. My business face? Harrison echoed. You know, all serious and no smiles. Ethan attempted an exaggerated, stern expression that made Harrison laugh. I suppose I do have a business face, he admitted. But I never want you to think I'm not proud of you, even when I'm wearing it. Ethan smiled, leaning against his father. Can we practice together before Ms. Collins comes? I want to surprise her with how much better I got. They played through the lullaby together, Harrison guiding Ethan through the trickier passages. When they finished, applause from the doorway startled them both. Emma stood there, coat still damp from the rain. That was wonderful, she said, her face lighting with genuine pleasure at seeing them together at the piano. Ms. Collins, we were going to surprise you, Ethan exclaimed. And you did, she assured him. What a lovely way to start a rainy morning. Harrison was suddenly conscious of the folder of sheet music beside him, evidence that connected Emma's grandmother directly to Rebecca. Ethan, why don't you get dressed while I speak with Ms. Collins? After Ethan left, Harrison held up the folder. I found this under the bench. Emma approached, recognition dawning on her face. My grandmother's arrangements. I brought them hoping they might have some beginner pieces for Ethan. I should have asked first. That's not why I'm showing you this. Harrison opened to the lullaby. Look. Emma studied the page, her expression softening. So it was my grandmother who taught your wife the melody. The note in the margin, R.W. It has to be Rebecca Winters, before we married. Harrison ran his finger along the faded inscription. All this time I thought she had composed it herself. She believed she had. Music has a way of becoming part of us, Emma said gently. Especially pieces we learn young. Your wife made it her own, gave it her spirit. In a way, it was hers. Harrison studied Emma's face, finding no triumph or vindication at being proven right, only understanding. Thank you, he said quietly, for bringing music back to this home. For Ethan. And, he hesitated, for me. The moment stretched between them, weighted with unspoken emotions. Emma was the first to look away, a flush coloring her cheeks. I should help Ethan with his morning routine, she said, stepping back. After she left, Harrison remained at the piano, thoughts swirling. The mystery of the lullaby was solved, yet new questions had taken its place. Questions about his own feelings that he wasn't ready to examine. His phone buzzed insistently. This time, he answered. Harrison, we have a situation, Alessandra said, without preamble. Jonathan is calling an emergency board meeting this afternoon. He's questioning your commitment to the Westridge acquisition. On what grounds? Harrison demanded. He claims you're distracted, making decisions based on personal matters rather than business interests. Her voice lowered. He specifically mentioned Emma Collins as a disruptive influence. Harrison's jaw tightened. That's absurd. The Westridge negotiations are proceeding exactly as planned. Nevertheless, he's gathering support. Several board members are concerned, after last night's display. My son playing piano is hardly a crisis, Harrison snapped. It's not just that. It's your changing patterns, leaving work early. The rumors about your closeness with the staff. Alessandra paused. Harrison, I've supported you through everything since Rebecca died, but even I have to ask, is this woman worth risking everything you've built? The question hung in the air like a discordant note. Harrison glanced toward the hallway where Emma's voice could be heard reading something to Ethan, her tone animated and warm. I'll be at the meeting, he said finally. Tell Jonathan. I expect him to come with facts, not innuendo. After ending the call, Harrison gathered the sheet music, his finger tracing the connection between Rebecca and Emma's grandmother, a connection that now seemed like fate rather than coincidence. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows with growing urgency. Inside, Harrison felt the pressure building between his carefully separated worlds, the empire he'd built and the home he'd neglected, both now demanding his full attention. And at the center of this brewing storm stood Emma Collins, a woman who had entered his life as quietly as the first notes of a lullaby, yet whose presence now threatened to crescendo into something neither of them had anticipated. As he prepared for the board meeting, Harrison knew the melody had changed. The simple lullaby had developed into a more complex composition, one whose resolution he couldn't yet foresee, but could no longer ignore. The Montgomery Financial boardroom hummed with tension. Harrison sat at the head of the polished table, expression carefully neutral despite the anger simmering beneath. Jonathan stood before a digital presentation, his voice carrying calculated concern. "The Westridge acquisition requires absolute focus," Jonathan emphasized, gesturing to the projected figures. Yet in recent weeks, Harrison's priorities have become divided. Several board members exchanged glances. Harrison felt their scrutiny like a physical weight. "If you have concerns about my leadership," Harrison stated evenly, "speak plainly." Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Very well. You've become distracted by domestic matters, specifically, your unusual attachment to an employee with questionable connections to Rebecca." "This is inappropriate," Harrison snapped. "Is it?" Jonathan countered. "When Westridge himself expressed concern about your commitment? When you leave meetings early for piano lessons?" The words hung in the air, damning, in their simplicity. "The acquisition is proceeding exactly as planned," Harrison responded coldly. "For now," Jonathan conceded, "but I propose a temporary solution. The Singapore division requires immediate attention. A 2-week trip would demonstrate your commitment and remove you from distractions." Harrison recognized the ultimatum beneath the suggestion: his company or his home, the empire he'd built or the fragile new melody beginning to play. As rain lashed the boardroom windows, Harrison felt the pressure building from all sides, forcing a decision he wasn't prepared to make. 2 weeks in Singapore is impossible," Harrison stated, rising from his chair. "I won't abandon my son for that long." Jonathan's expression hardened. "Your son has survived your absences before. He has staff." "That's precisely the issue, isn't it?" Harrison challenged, voice dangerously quiet. "Not that I'm neglecting business, but that I'm finally present for Ethan." The boardroom fell silent, executives shifting uncomfortably. "Your judgment is compromised," Jonathan insisted. "This woman has a name," Harrison interrupted. "Emma Collins. And she's done nothing but help my son heal. She's exploiting a connection to Rebecca to manipulate her way into your household. Your life. Rebecca would be horrified." "Don't," Harrison warned, slamming his palm on the table. "Don't use my wife's memory as leverage," Alessandra intervened, voice measured. "Perhaps a compromise. 3 days in Singapore, video conferences for the rest." Jonathan scoffed. "Inadequate." "It's all you're getting," Harrison declared. "I'm still CEO. This meeting is adjourned." As executives filed out, Jonathan lingered. "You're making a mistake. That woman is going to cost you everything." "No," Harrison replied softly. "I think she's helping me remember what everything really is." Driving home through the rain, Harrison realized the true battle was just beginning, and for the first time in years he was ready to fight for something beyond business. Harrison found the penthouse quiet when he returned, earlier than usual despite the board confrontation. In the kitchen, a note from Emma explained she'd taken Ethan to his long-neglected pediatrician appointment, something Harrison had completely forgotten. He wandered to the music room, picking up Eleanor Collins' arrangement folder. Flipping through it, he discovered more margin notes connecting Rebecca to Emma's grandmother. Lessons, recitals, specific pieces Rebecca had loved. The pieces were falling into place. Not manipulation or deception, but a genuine connection across generations through music. The elevator chimed, announcing Emma and Ethan's return. "Dad, you're home!" Ethan rushed to him. "The doctor says I'm super healthy, and we got ice cream after." "Sounds perfect," Harrison smiled, catching Emma's surprised expression at finding him home mid-afternoon. "I hope you don't mind that I took him," she said. The reminder was on the calendar. "I appreciate it." Harrison replied. Actually, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. He hesitated, suddenly aware of Jonathan's accusations echoing in his mind. Was he risking too much? Was his judgment truly compromised? But looking at Ethan's brightened face and Emma's gentle concern, Harrison realized some risks were worth taking, and some music needed to be played regardless of who might be listening. I found something in your grandmother's notes, he began. Something I think we all need to talk about. Your grandmother and Rebecca weren't just teacher and student, Harrison explained as they sat in the music room. They collaborated. He showed Emma the folder's final pages, compositions credited to both Eleanor Collins and Rebecca Winters, including variations of the lullaby. My grandmother never mentioned this, Emma whispered, tracing the dual signatures. Rebecca was private about her music, Harrison said, but these prove your connection is genuine. Ethan looked between them, sensing the significance. So Ms. Collins's grandmother and mom were friends? That's why they both knew the lullaby? More than friends, musical partners, Harrison confirmed. Their moment of discovery was interrupted by the elevator's chime. Jonathan strode in unannounced, his expression thunderous. I thought I'd find you here instead of preparing for Singapore, he said coldly. Harrison rose. Jonathan, this isn't the time. Jonathan's gaze locked on the music folder. What's this, more manipulation? Emma stood protectively near Ethan. These are my grandmother's arrangements. They show that Rebecca and she worked together. Convenient forgeries, Jonathan snapped. Harrison, I've moved the Singapore trip to tomorrow. The jet is being prepared. I told you, 3 days maximum. Harrison countered. The board disagrees. It's 2 weeks or a vote of no confidence. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Ethan pressed against Emma, eyes wide with apprehension. You're going away again, he asked, his small voice breaking the tension. Harrison looked at his son, then at Emma, then at the music that had brought an unexpected harmony to their lives. No, he said finally. I'm not. You can't be serious. Jonathan's voice sliced through the silence. You'd risk Montgomery Financial for this? His gesture encompassed Ethan, Emma, and the piano. I'm deadly serious, Harrison replied, steadier than he felt. If the board wants to vote, let them, but I won't abandon my son again. Jonathan stepped closer. Think of what Rebecca would want, the company you built together, the legacy for Ethan's future. Rebecca would want Ethan to be happy, Harrison countered, to have music in his life, to know his father. The company means nothing if I lose him in the process. Dad? Ethan's voice was small. Harrison knelt before his son. I'm not going to Singapore. I'm staying right here. Jonathan's face hardened. You're making a catastrophic mistake. This woman has clouded your judgment completely. No. Harrison stood tall. For the first time in 3 years, I'm seeing clearly. Emma has helped me remember what matters. Emma placed a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. Mr. Winters, please, this isn't helping anyone. You've done enough, Jonathan snapped at her. When this falls apart, remember it was your interference that destroyed Rebecca's legacy. Harrison moved between them. That's enough. It's time for you to leave. After Jonathan stormed out, the penthouse fell silent, except for the soft patter of rain against windows. Are you really staying? Ethan asked, hope flickering across his face. Harrison held his son close. Yes, some things are worth fighting for. His eyes met Emma's over Ethan's head, and in that moment the music they'd found together seemed stronger than any threat hanging over them. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock. Harrison arrived early, arrangements endure. Place, determination said in every line of his face. The boardroom gradually filled with tense executives. Jonathan at the far end, triumph barely concealed beneath a veneer of corporate concern. Before we begin, Harrison stated, standing tall at the head of the table, I'd like to distribute something. Alessandra, who had chosen to stand with Harrison after learning the full story, passed out folders containing photocopies of Eleanor Collins' music sheets, including the collaborative pieces with Rebecca. What's this supposed to prove? Jonathan demanded. That the connection between Emma Collins and my late wife is authentic, Harrison replied evenly. Rebecca studied with Emma's grandmother for years. They composed together. He placed a final document on the table, a notarized affidavit from Rebecca's former piano teacher confirming the relationship. As for my commitment to this company, Harrison continued, I've restructured the Singapore trip into video conferences and a 3-day visit next month. The acquisition remains on schedule. Several board members exchanged impressed glances. This doesn't change the fundamental problem, Jonathan insisted. Your priorities have expanded to include my son. Harrison interrupted, as they should have years ago. He leaned forward, addressing the entire board. If that's unacceptable, I'll tender my resignation. But I suspect shareholders will prefer my balanced approach to your single-minded focus on control, Jonathan. 2. Board's vote was decisive, 11-2 in Harrison's favor. As executives filed out, Jonathan remained defeated but defiant. This isn't over. Actually, Harrison replied calmly, it is. You've lost, Jonathan. Not because of Emma or music or even me, but because you never understood what Rebecca truly valued. The penthouse gleamed in the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Harrison had loosened his tie, relief washing over him as he stepped from the elevator. The confrontation with Jonathan and the board was behind him, and for the first time in years he felt truly free. He found Emma and Ethan in the music room, heads bent together over a new piece of music. They looked up at his approach, uncertainty in both their expressions. Well? Emma asked softly. Harrison smiled, the tension visibly leaving his shoulders. The board voted in my favor, by a significant margin. Ethan jumped up, launching himself at his father. You're staying? For real? For real, Harrison confirmed, hugging his son tightly. And I've restructured my work schedule. I'll be home every evening by 6 without exception. Emma remained seated at the piano, joy in her eyes, yet a certain reserve in her posture. That's wonderful news. There's more, Harrison said, setting Ethan down. I've been thinking about Rebecca's music, about what it means to preserve someone's legacy. He joined Emma at the piano bench, Ethan hovering nearby. Rebecca would want her music to live, to be shared, Harrison continued, not locked away as Jonathan insisted. From his briefcase, he withdrew a leather-bound folder. These are all of Rebecca's compositions, including the ones she wrote with your grandmother. Emma's eyes widened as he placed it in her hands. I'd like to establish a music scholarship in Rebecca's name, Harrison explained, for talented students who couldn't otherwise afford lessons, and I'd like you to help me design it. Me? Emma whispered. Who better? Harrison smiled. Your grandmother's influence shaped Rebecca's musical journey. Now you're doing the same for Ethan. And for you, Ethan added with a child's directness. Dad plays all the time now. A soft blush colored Emma's cheeks. I'd be honored to help. Excellent. Harrison nodded. The first benefit concert will be in 3 months. Plenty of time for our star pianist to prepare. He ruffled Ethan's hair affectionately. Can we play Mom's song at the concert? Ethan asked eagerly. The whole thing, all the parts Grandma Eleanor helped write? I think that would be perfect, Harrison agreed. The 3 of us together. As Ethan darted off to practice, Harrison found himself alone with Emma, the quiet understanding between them deepening into something neither had expected when she first arrived. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. Emma's smile was genuine, warm. Music has a way of healing what we thought was broken forever. Harrison's hand found hers on the piano bench, their fingers lightly touching. Some melodies are worth fighting for. The afternoon light caught the dust motes dancing above the piano, illuminating the space where grief had given way to a cautious new beginning, a harmony none of them had anticipated, but which now seemed as natural as Rebecca's lullaby itself. 3 months passed like the quickening tempo of a well-composed piece. Spring had arrived in New York, bringing with it renewal that seemed to mirror the transformation within the Montgomery household. The concert hall of the Hamilton School of Music buzzed with anticipation. Benefactors, students, and press had gathered for the inaugural Rebecca, Montgomery Music Foundation benefit. Harrison adjusted his bow tie in the green room mirror, an unfamiliar nervousness fluttering in his stomach, not the stage fright of performance, but the weight of meaningful tribute. "Dad, do I look okay?" Ethan asked, fidgeting with his small suit jacket. Harrison knelt, straightening his son's collar. "You look perfect. More importantly, you're ready. We've practiced for months." "Ms. Collins says I shouldn't worry about mistakes," Ethan confided. "She says the feeling matters more than perfection." "Ms. Collins is very wise," Harrison smiled. Speaking of whom, Emma entered the green room, elegant in a simple blue dress, her hair styled in loose waves rather than her usual practical ponytail. Harrison felt his breath catch, a reaction that had become increasingly familiar in recent weeks. "The hall is full," she reported, eyes bright with excitement. "And they've displayed Eleanor's and Rebecca's original sheet music in the lobby, just as you suggested." Harrison nodded. "It belongs there, not hidden away but inspiring others." 5 minutes later, they took the stage together. Harrison sat at the grand piano, Ethan beside him, Emma on his other side. The spotlight illuminated them as Harrison leaned toward the microphone. "My wife Rebecca believed music was a bridge between souls," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "Tonight, we celebrate that connection across time, across generations." His fingers found the opening notes of the lullaby, the melody that had started everything. Ethan joined, playing the simple counter melody they had practiced. Then Emma added the complex harmonization her grandmother had written with Rebecca years ago. The music swelled through the hall, no longer just a lullaby but a complete composition, parts that had been separated now reunited, creating something more beautiful than any single element could achieve alone. As they played the final section, the triumphant awakening after the gentle sleep, Harrison glanced at Emma, then at Ethan. His son's face glowed with concentration and joy. Emma's gentle guidance had made this possible, had helped both Montgomery men find their way back to music, back to connection, back to life. The final chord resonated through the hall. For a moment, perfect silence held the audience captive. Then applause thundered, people rising to their feet. "We did it," Ethan whispered, beaming. "Yes," Harrison agreed, his hand finding Emma's between them. "Together, we did." As they took their bows, Harrison felt Rebecca's presence, not as a ghost to be mourned, but as a melody that had led him to this unexpected harmony. The lullaby, that had once represented only loss, had transformed into a song of new beginnings, and in the warm clasp of Emma's hand, Harrison knew that some compositions weren't written but lived, through pain, through healing, and through the courage to let a new movement begin.